Okay, let me call the City Council meeting, North Ogden City Council meeting to order. Welcome friends and guests and whatever your interest. Always nice to have residents here and interested parties. We'll excuse the mayor who had a prior engagement in Salt Lake and he's stuck in traffic. The schedule would allow him to get home in time, but not with, somebody said there's 3 accidents on I-15. So we'll begin our meeting with an invocation and pledge of allegiance, and we've asked Council Member Uri to do that.
Our Heavenly Father, we bow our heads this evening and give thanks to Thee for the blessings that Thou hast given to us. Grateful to live in this community of North Ogden, and we're grateful for the great citizens and of the city and the employees of the city. Pray Thy blessings to be upon them in every aspect of their lives. Grateful to be able to serve the community as members of City Council and staff, and we pray that we might remember who we serve and we might be able to make good decisions concerning our community. We pray that as we discuss items today, that all discussions will be civil and we'll be able to, even when we don't agree with each other, to still call each other friend and be able to carry forward to defend the Constitution and the ordinances of our community. These things we pray for in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So thank you, Councilmember Uri. I'm glad our prayers are verbal. It sounded like we could have had an email that we might have sent, and we don't want to do that. So the first item on the agenda is public comments. We invite any of you who are here to come to the podium and share with us whatever you'd like to share. We don't have when we have a public hearing, we'll encourage you, which we don't have. So share whatever you'd like to share.
We do.
Do we?
Number 6, we got a public hearing.
Yeah, so if it has to do with item 6, regarding the annexation, I'd ask you to hold your comments until we get to that item. Clements, seeing none, we'll move on to agenda item 2. We're going to discuss and consider action on a legislative application to enter into an interlocal agreement with Weber County, and the presenter is our attorney, John Call.
Bless you.
So, Council, I'm going to pull up, this is the annexation plat that you had approved last week for the Mosier property. Those of you remember, it's down on 1700 North, and it's a big, long, skinny property, and our computer hates our projector today, so it's up here. Anyways. So it's the same agreement that we did for the Village at Prominence Point property after the annexation process was started, that allows us to be the building and land use authority for the property. That will allow us to issue a demolition permit, issue a building permit, and let the Mosiers get started on their thing. It's the exact same agreement that was in our previous. The one that you approved for the Village at Prominence Point with a different address, and then you're going to see the same agreement when we get down to the next item, or a couple items down on the agenda, when we're talking about the web annexation as well. So the idea is that it allows the property owners to move forward with development on their property, and when we don't have to hold it up because we're waiting for the 90-day annexation process to finalize. So. Do you have any questions?
Do they have the option during this time to go to the county to get approvals?
They can. The trouble is the county ordinances are a little different than ours in some respects, particularly with a building permit, like for the Mosier's building permit. The county's basically told them they won't give them a building permit since they know they're going to annex into the city. And so I would anticipate it would be the same with the Webb property. They'd tell them, hey, if you're annexing, then we're not gonna come inspect your building just so you can, because you're gonna, in the middle of the process, you're gonna be in North Ogden City. So this kind of allows both groups to kind of fast track the process.
John, did they request this annexation, or were you requiring it?
They're requesting this one, and I think it's in part because the county, and I'm probably speculating, but I think the county is resistant to letting homes that should be annexed into the city get
built.
Yeah, yeah. I think the county's pressuring them to annex it in as well.
Okay.
So, and the staff recommends this. It makes it easier for the landowners, and we're happy to help them out where we can.
So we commonly do this
Yeah.
on all annexations so that they can.
We have an agreement number?
A30.
A30-2017.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I would move that we approve agreement A30-2017, entering into an interlocal agreement with Weber County designating North Ogden as the city as the land use authority for the property at 744 East 1700 North.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the interlocal agreement, approve the interlocal agreement with the county. Is there any further discussion, council? Then let's proceed to vote. We'll start with Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Councilman Uri?
Yes.
Swanson?
Yes.
And Turner?
Yes.
So it's unanimous. 5 votes for and 0 votes against. We'll go on to item 2. We're going to consider accepting a petition from Daniel and Allison Webb for processing towards an annexation. So this is and the address is on 2521 North Mountain Road. This just starts the process, and we'll give the floor to our attorney again to discuss.
Okay. So I'm pulling up the map.
Not letting me pull it.
I don't know what is going on with our computers today.
It's right there. It was almost on the screen. Oh, you just went past the screen.
Let us.
Oh, it's dove them in
There you go.
between the two. So
Your
this
laser won't work on TV, I don't think.
can you all see this? I know it's a weird angle. I tried to pull it out more, but it won't let me.
It was in our packet.
It was in your packet. Oh, and of course the red pointer doesn't work either.
No.
So Mountain Road is down here. This is, I'm trying to remember the name of the development up here. It's right below, there's a big detention basin the city has at the bottom of Cold Creek Canyon. And then the Webbs own the property between that basin and Mountain Road. There's also a canal. The canal comes across it as well.
Runs across that piece of property there?
Yeah, and so technically there's two different.
It's just the upper parcel.
This is just the upper parcel.
Yeah, so the left end of that is canal.
So the canal's right here,
Correct.
and then is the lower parcel already in the city?
Yep.
Okay, so the lower parcel's already in the city, and then Mountain Road's out here, and so a home on this piece, and so they need to annex it into the city, and so this again starts the process for that. It starts the 90-day period for someone to come in and object. It's in our annexation plan, and there's no reason not to annex it into the city. They will connect to our utility services when they come in and build their home and get the permits from our folks here and all of that stuff. So
is this by John Dunkley's house? Just kind of across from it?
The upper border is Old Lord.
So you-
North border, as you see it, is Coldwater Creek.
Yeah, so Dunkley's house is right here.
It's up quite a bit.
it's up high. So you're on Lower Mountain Road, aren't you? Well, I mean, when you say John Dunkley's, I'm picturing up, way up the hill and just on the east side of the canal, but you're down. Okay,
Down the
okay, I know
hill
where you're
from up there, his driveway.
John Dunkley's Road is what you see there is the lower edge of the property. John Dunkley's dirt road right now.
So it's, you can see a corner of the Dunkley property is this. So this is John Dunkley's property line, and then there's another property owner here, but the road comes from Mountain Road and up to his property. So.
And how many acres are we talking about?
So about 2 1/4. And so what we need from council is, essentially you're just accepting the application, and then that starts the 90-day process before the annexation is able to take final acceptance and be sent to the Lieutenant Governor's office.
I would move that we accept the annexation request, petition for annexation.
So we have a motion or a move to accept. Do we don't have to do an agreement number here? We just approve it?
Not till the next one.
Yep, you just accept the petition, and then the agreement will be the next item.
Okay, any further discussion, council?
Did we have a second?
Yes. Second, yeah.
Cheryl seconded it.
Okay.
about 3 times.
So you're good with motion and a
Yeah,
second?
you're fine.
Okay. And so let's proceed to vote. I shall vote yes. Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
and Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
And so the voting is unanimous to accept the petition for annexation. Okay, next on the agenda.
Same thing as we had on number 2, right?
Just,
We just need
An application to enter into a
Same.
interlocal agreement for the property located for this property right here.
Agreement number.
And so there again, council, this is the same agreement as you just approved for the Mosier property. And this also will allow the Webbs to start construction or start the process for anything that they want to do. And work with us as opposed to trying to work between the two entities. They've been pulled back and forth a little bit between us and the county, and so this will help make their lives a little easier, we're hoping, moving forward.
So I just understood you to say that they could do anything they wanted to do, so if there's deer on the property, they can shoot them, right?
So if they, technically, as long as it's still in the county, so they wouldn't be subject to our criminal ordinances, but they'd still be subject to the state ordinances about discharge of firearms within proximity to structures.
Okay.
So,
Just want to clear that up.
yep.
Okay, any further questions? Or it's 8:31.
Yep, A31, 2017, to enter the interlocal agreement with Weber County for the property at 2521 North Mountain Road.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the application to enter into the interlocal agreement as mentioned in the motion. Is there any further discussion?
I got a question.
We don't typically take questions from the floor unless the council wants to make an exception here.
I'd like to hear what he has to say.
okay with it.
Okay, so council has made a move that we will acknowledge. You want to come to the microphone here and give us your name and address, please?
It's just real quick.
It's all right. Well, I'm sorry. It'll keep a lot of other meetings in order if we don't.
Well,
if we do what we usually do here.
I just wanted to say that why the water is out of that canal, we were hoping to get the utilities under it. I guess would be part of this interlocal agreement. I don't know if that could potentially be hurried in any way, why the water is out of the canal so that we can get our utilities under it in a safe manner, why it's not full of water.
Okay, I think our attorney will,
Name and address for
yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm Dan Webb.
And your address?
I live in Roy. I don't know if that matters.
Yes, please give us your address.
2938 West, 4900 South in Roy.
Very good.
So all that'll be left after the council approves this agreement is we'll send it to Weber County, and then they'll approve the agreement as well. And then we're free to give you all the approvals you need to dig under the canal. And I mean,
Okay.
you still have to get permission from the canal company, but it's
Yeah, we've been through all
Yeah.
of that. So
yeah,
I
it'll
wanted
just
to-
be us then.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that why that was empty, that I could do
Yeah.
what we needed to do.
That way you can build in the spring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, why it's empty, it would just be safer to be able to do that now, whatever the time frame that would be. So.
Any other questions from, thank you, Mr. Webb. So any other discussion? So let's proceed to vote. We'll go to Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So item 4 is approved by the council, 5-0. Unanimous. And now we're on to item 5, discussion or action to amend the agreement for the village at Prominence Point. And we turn the time over to our attorney, John Call.
Okay, so council, you should have been received on Friday in your packet a revision of the development agreement we had approved 2 weeks ago. As the developer was giving this out to some of his partners, they noticed some things that I missed in drafting this or redrafting it for when we added the extra part property. And so I'm going to try and go through those with you. And then we also have a representative, Jeff, I forgot his last name.
It's Craig Winder.
Craig Winder, sorry. Craig.
Forgot his first name too, didn't you?
Nice to have you here, Bob.
I shouldn't have forgot his last name because that's my middle
We have
name.
hundreds of people through here, so forgive us.
But so I've got, so we'll kind of go through the individual things, and then so you can see what's been modified, and I'll explain the reason why. The first one is this change from 18.26 acres to 34 plus or minus acres. That's something that now makes it consistent with the actual legal description that was approved as part of this agreement that incorporates the full 34 acres of property. Let's see. This on page 4 is capturing the numbers of units. We had modified them in another part of the agreement, and I didn't modify them in both parts of the agreement. And so this is making it clear that it's 107 townhomes as opposed to 101. It's 28 patio homes as opposed to 26, and it's 68 independent living units as opposed to 80. And so those are changes that were actually identified last time we talked about this in a different section. It's just this agreement says it twice, and so we didn't capture them both. The next change is deals with providing, or kind of deals with the public access across the property. And what it says is that the developer will provide public access that connects the 300 East cul-de-sac, which is at the north end of the property, to 1700 North, and east from Washington Boulevard, headed west to the independent living or the assisted living facility. So the idea is that there's going to be a trail between the two properties, and let me pull up a map so that might help you better visualize it.
So, John, in this section where you're talking about it connecting from 300 East to 1700 North, we're talking about sidewalks, correct?
Yes.
Not a street. I just want to make sure that
Right.
those residents in the cul-de-sac up there don't think that suddenly there's a a road connection that's suddenly going to go through there.
Right. Yes, this is only talking about the pedestrian connection, and there is some language that we'll talk about a little further on, or that's already incorporated, that says that there's an easement across that street for public access in case a future council does punch the road through, so that we don't have to buy it from this development as well as the folks to the north. But the anticipation still is that's never going to be, that's never something that the city's going to actually do. So here, let me pull this map up if I can. So east to west, we're talking essentially about this point connecting out here to Washington Boulevard. And north to south is basically this sidewalk to this point for pedestrian access. There again, to make it so that people can walk through. And we still have to work out with the cul-de-sac neighbors to the north, the access across their property. But it's now, there's nothing that would inhibit us on the developer side from getting those things in. Let me go back to, sorry, this computer has really thrown, now it's, sorry, it's now, it keeps jumping on whether this is the end screen or the middle screen, so, and now it's going to go to the middle or the end again. Apparently we need to have our computer guy come fix this, because attorneys don't understand computers.
Got a hammer outside.
Yeah.
A big one.
This change is something that has come up based on the site plan. Now, if you remember from our previous discussion 2 weeks ago, we had approved or talked about the heights of the townhomes, and on what we call Exhibit L, it shows the height of the northern townhome units. So the units the units up here are held to that lower height of 31 feet. And then the units down here on Exhibit L have a higher footage. And my understanding, based on our conversation, was that was what the council was okay with, was because of the proximity to the single-family homes, even though they're twin homes, they're still single-family homes, that these units were going to be shorter, but then these would be allowed to be taller. And if that was your understanding, the developer on that agreement, I believe, or on that exhibit, let me pull it up because I don't want you to just trust me, because it's there again. It's the reason that this document is so important. I've lost my mouse. So you can see that. Let it clear up. So it right now it shows a height of 39 feet, and then the developer, and I think it would be good for the council to have a chance to listen to Craig get up and provide you some information, has come up with some sketches and some preliminary plans that actually showed that it might be a more attractive unit and give us more of the curb appeal if we give an additional 7 feet on those items, so they'd be 46 feet tall. And if the council's okay with that, then we will make that part of this document as well, so that it wouldn't go, it would, instead of bumping up to 39 feet, it would bump up to 36 feet.
46 feet.
Or 46. And then the second portion of it, down here, subsection C, it's talking about this idea that for the cottages, which are here, that these corner units that are further away from the property can make use of that that provision in the MPC zone that says if you're a foot further back than 20 feet, you can now go up a foot, because there's some desire for, I think, these two units to have a third garage and maybe a bonus room above the garage. So where they're further back, you can see here's the 20-foot setback line. And so they're looking to be 35 or maybe, 30, 35 feet away from the property line. So I think the desire is to put a bonus room there. And you can ask Craig, and I don't know that we have a specific height because they haven't designed them yet, but I think that that's something that Craig is ready to answer questions about. Any questions so far? That I don't want to give you everything if you want to discuss each item individually as we move through these. Yeah.
On this one with the, on the last two things, you talked about the 39 versus 46 feet.
Mm-hmm.
I have some pause about.
I second that.
I also, in paragraph C there, the maximum height in the cottages is 24 or must comply with the one additional setback. I'm a little uncomfortable with the openness of that because it doesn't tell me how high the building is going to be. You're the attorney. To me, it seems like with that statement, we give them, okay, you can basically go as high as you want to as long as you meet the additional 1 foot per. And there's no restriction on the height, and I'm uncomfortable with that, if I'm reading it correctly.
So that's the way it's worded. The way it's worded right now is essentially the way it's written in the MPC zone. But if the council felt more comfortable saying up to a maximum of X number of feet, then I think that we can ask Craig, but I think they'd be open to that. So the idea would be you can get the 1 foot up per foot back you go, but only up to 35 feet, which is, I picked that number because that's the standard for most residential buildings. That's what was going
through my head was the standard home height of 35 feet that we would allow there. If a standard single-family home were being built, we'd go to 35 feet. I'd be happier with that additional language of to a maximum of 35 feet in height.
Okay.
Craig, does that
I think that works.
give enough for the third garage and the bonus room over the top, if that's the intent?
I think that works. Let me.
Why don't you come up here to the mic?
Oh, I apologize.
Name, address, social security number?
Yes, sir.
Blood type.
Craig Winder. I'm General Counsel and VP of Development for Ironwood Development. I think, Councilman, that would work. In fact, I think there's a statutory limit on 55 and over dwellings that I think is within that 35-foot requirement. So if we want to do that, John, I think we're fine with it.
Okay.
Should I stay up here?
I think so.
Okay. Because
I think it might be good for the council to be able to ask you questions as we go through this. Anything else before we move on to the next suggestion?
The
Let's
question
talk
on
about the 46.
39
Oh.
versus 46 feet.
So I think
Okay, sure.
I think Craig's actually got some elevations.
These elevations I brought to show the finishes and exteriors that we're going to put on them. These don't include any potentially 3-story townhomes. And as John mentioned, our understanding with respect to the 31-foot requirement was that it would be limited to the townhomes along the north because of the concern that there was with the neighboring property owners, and we're fine with that. Those are going to be 2-story. A 3-story townhome, because of the nature of these townhomes, I should say the quality of these townhomes, we're going to be doing 9-foot ceilings on each level. And so if we just add another level of 9 feet plus, so you have to add another 1 foot of like a floor system, and then you've got 9 feet, and then we've got the roof. And our concern, 39 feet doesn't work if we want to do 9-foot ceilings. If we could get around between 42 and 45 feet, that would allow us to have a roof pitch that we feel is more eye appealing. That's the reason for our request.
Okay. So we're not changing from 2 to 3-story.
Not along the north, certainly not.
No. We're talking about the north-south run The ones that you're
Ones that are-
wanting to go 42 to 45 feet, those were going to be 3-story anyway.
We wanted to at least have the option of having those be 3-story, yes.
Have they been designed to this point as 3-story?
We have some elevations for a 3-story product, yes, which I don't have with me tonight. But yeah, we definitely wanted to keep that option open.
In my mind, I always had in my mind that they were going to be 2 stories.
All of them? Yeah, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but our understanding with respect to the 39-foot limitation was as to 2-story products running along the northern boundary of the project.
I think that the mayor and I understood it to be a 3-story, that it would be 2-story at the north end and 3-story the rest. I think that's the way it was explained to Jack and I, or to the mayor and I by Jack. And so I think if that wasn't communicated.
Didn't we at one time have some renderings of what they were going to look like? And I don't remember them showing 3-story. I think they showed 2-story.
So we haven't had an actual rendering of the townhomes. The only renderings we've had have been of the apartment units. And so what the 3-story unit allows you to do is put the garage essentially under the main floor of the house, and then some stairs up to an entrance, or sometimes they'll put the entrance on the side of the garage. They do this type of a townhome out east quite a bit, because it allows you to build a skinnier unit as opposed to trying to put a living room beside a townhome. To kind of incorporate the built-in garage as opposed to Sunbrook, where the garages sit out in front of the townhomes and kind of block the front doors.
Would this would this enhance, I should say, the parking ratio?
It would make the parking ratio policy. I mean, they work together in the sense that you can get now, instead of each townhome only being able to get a 1-car garage, you can now get a 2-car garage in several of the units, not necessarily all of them, which helps them meet that parking number.
So we're not
We talked about previously, it doesn't help them increase.
It does help.
The 39-foot, and this is, Craig can tell me if I'm wrong, but my impression would be that they would still try to push to that 3-story, because that's most likely what the people are going to want to buy, and the roofs would get flatter, because we measure to the peak of the roof, not the average height, and so the roofs would get flatter to kind of help meet that peak height limitation that we have.
I guess my question is, John, we were presented with what the number of parking spaces would be. Does this add to that, or is it the same?
If it'll be the same.
Yeah.
So if it was a 2-story unit, then they would put more on the ground story, and it might actually negatively impact parking, because they might lose a couple garage stalls as they tried to fit the number of units in the building. If that makes sense.
And this borders the to the west. This would be bordering the assisted living facility, correct?
Yes.
So we'd be a long way away from any single-family homes.
That's
Yes.
correct.
It'd all be interior height.
Yeah. So
It'd just be that west row, John?
So it'll be these units and all of these. So everything that's orange except for those. And then just to there again remind you, these units are all 3-story units.
At what height?
They are 45 or 46 feet. And then the 4-story units are where they reach the 51, 52 feet. So, and when I say 4-story, if you remember, it's the end units in the middle that kind of get that loft.
Right.
But my understanding is, and we can go back to that exhibit, L. Let me. So, I guess right now, so this one's showing 39 to 46. So
Is that the 4-story?
I think so.
Because you won't have the 9-foot ceilings.
Right. There'll be a lower ceiling unit. That's the difference. That's why. And so Craig, how many feet are you asking for over the 39?
We would prefer 45.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would give you plenty of room to work in.
Plenty of room to have the roof pitch that we find consistent with the rest of the project.
Hey, if you're not staying for the whole meeting, we might retract your.
You're fine. Thanks. Thanks for joining us.
You got off easy tonight.
So yeah, I forgot because I was trying to figure out why it didn't work, but that's the reason why is
There's a
it's
lot of
the
this on the site plan. We need to have the site plan, not a moving target here.
Yeah.
It needs to be pinned down.
and so that's that change that's being requested. Or do you want to discuss? Do you want to go to the next one?
I'll just throw my 2 cents in here. We base a lot of this, because the site plan had the detail, a lot of the detail, and now it looks like some of that detail is changing. I think we need to have a site plan that's accurate, represents what the changes are being, what changes are being requested.
Okay.
I agree with Councilman Satterthwaite, although I would say that tentatively, given the heights of some of the other buildings right there on the interior, I don't know that we're opening any kind of a can of worms by allowing 45 feet along that north-south row of townhomes. But I agree with Lynn. I'd like to see that in the site plan and pinned down and not so much a moving target.
Okay.
I agree.
I don't.
You don't?
Nope.
You're always
The
disagreeing.
reason I don't is because as a developer and as a designer, they're not going to develop or design anything unless they have parameters. And now we're telling them, well, you got to give us a design of 39 or you got to give us a design of 46. We want to see both of them before we agree on this. The site plan is still going to have to come and be approved and go through the scrutiny of the planning commission, and I mean, because they haven't even submitted a site plan. So all we're doing is giving them a parameters. If it comes back and we don't like it, we can still say, that's not what we're going to do. So that's why I say,
Give them parameters.
give them the parameters. Tell them. That's why I don't agree with the fact that, and the fact that we are set back so far, and we have other buildings that are 50 feet.
Yeah.
And I don't see how it's going to affect that development, and I don't think I see how it's going to affect the neighbors, in my opinion. So that's why I just, I mean, as if you're designing it, they need to kind of have an idea the way you design it. Am I going to spend the thousands of dollars literally to develop it at 39 or develop it at 46? So that's.
Well, I think it's point well taken, and I think I still think that we, well, and you've said we're going to approve a final site plan. I think we want to see all the numbers, but I think we ought to have enough discussion so that they're not spinning their wheels, putting things in that we're not going to approve.
I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that and spending
certainly,
the money
I mean,
to do that.
The site plan, obviously the site plan does need to be approved, and there's a procedure for that. And what we'd like from the city council tonight is a thumbs up or thumbs down on what we are proposing for the site plan, which will ultimately be approved or denied according to the normal course of the procedure. And really, what we're asking for is an amendment to the development agreement. Site plan will obviously need to reflect whatever the development agreement says.
So this, Carl, would give them the parameter
That's the way I read it.
up to
is
45 if we changed it to that.
It'd give them the parameters saying, yes, we'll consider those. Allow them to start their developing, or they're developing the drawings, and then they come and, John, am I wrong? Am I reading it wrong, or?
So the way the townhomes work, the way that, as we discussed 2 weeks ago, is site plan and elevation approval will be done by Rob and the mayor. But Exhibit L, it'd be really easy to just, because it's, if we go back to it, or if I try to go back to it, it's really easy.
That's easy for you to say.
It's really easy to identify that all these numbers that say 39 feet will be amended to say 46 or 45. I mean, that to me is it's a fairly simple word change that we can just provide the new site plan, and we'll just make sure we've got it before we sign it.
Well, if he's okay with 45, I'd rather say 45 than 46.
I'm fine with 45.
Yeah, and I keep saying 46, and they've never asked for 46. It's in my mind. I don't know where I'm getting that number from, but
47 is.
Because you said it was 39 feet and they needed 7. That's where it came from.
oh, so yeah, it's only
39 and
it's
7
6.
is 46.
Yeah.
Weber High math, buddy.
Sterling scholar that year, huh?
Well, no, but I did go there.
With
Council
Carl-
has
with-
approved-
With Carl's
has the
comments, I'm
power.
okay setting that parameter at 45 feet.
I agree.
Okay.
Thanks for the insight, Carl.
That's the thought I had.
So the council can defy Weber math and make 7 to 6. Just like that.
Okay. So I'm just adding the. So I'm going to pull this up, and you'll see in purple the language that the 45 feet. So it went from 39 to 45, and then down here in subsection C, it says up to a maximum of 35 feet for the cottages. So does that capture everything that you're comfortable with at this point?
Yes.
Okay. Well, then maybe let's just stay in this document, because it's that way if we're modifying it, it's easier to follow. And I'm gonna go to the changes that you saw in your document. There's a couple other clarifications that have come up over the weekend that we want to discuss. The next one was on subsection 12, which talked about the garbage containers. There was some confusion about, was the block wall supposed to have a lid on it, or were the trash containers supposed to have a lid on them? And staff's understanding was that the trash containers would have a plastic lid on them so that they close, but not that the block needed to be covered. And so I've made that, I've tried to make it more clear that the trash receptacles have lids, and then that the block around them is 7 feet tall, and it had been listed at 9, which is not something we require in anybody else. 7 is our standard for every other zone, but that being said, I don't remember why 9 feet was put in there in the first place. So is council okay with the 7 feet that we
You
do
had
other
9
places?
because you went from 46 feet and you subtracted it.
It's got all balance at the
Yeah,
bottom.
yeah,
huh?
yeah.
That hypotenuse and.
Yeah. So then under subsection 13, this is the language I talked about being added. The idea being that that road that connects, the road that is south of the cul-de-sac will have a public access easement on it, so that if the council ever decides, hey, that has to go through, then we don't have to buy the easement from the individual town homeowners. So,
Hey, John,
yes.
is there any easements in that area for utilities at all that we know of?
So there, from the HOA to the north, there's an easement across their common area for utilities. So if we need to run storm or sewer or water or anything across that, we can. But then once we get into the project, we hadn't anticipated having any public utility easements, except for out front along Washington and down south along 1700. So the idea would be everything internal would be privately owned, is the way that it's currently planned. Any questions about those two items, council? Okay. This next change is piggybacks on that interconnection for the walking paths. So it was just catching the language that was in 2 sections in the agreement and tying it back to, we're going to allow a north-south and an east-west walking path for people to cross through the development.
Do we have parameters on the path and what it's, or is it just sidewalk?
So that will come during the landscaping plan approval. And so right now, I don't know what the parameters are, other than they're not going to be a 4-foot sidewalk. They'll be larger than that. Or there'll be something that makes it makes it desirable to walk through that area. And then this next change under, let's see, we're in section 16, subsection C. This is piggybacked on that public access. So this is making it clear that the developer still has the right to close off portions of the development from public access. So people aren't allowed to go play on the playground or go to the clubhouse or do things like that. This is only for those walking past. They still have control over the rest of their property. And that was, so I think that the city wants them to be able to have that ability, unless any council member sees a reason why that wouldn't be the case. Okay. Not seeing any objections. And the next change, that might actually be the last.
There's one in.
26?
Yes.
So this was something that, just a clarification from the developer, saying that they wanted to make it clear that the HOA manages it on behalf of the ownership of the condo. So it was just I think it came from an attorney as opposed to anybody else. It's one of those language tweaks that attorneys like, because they just like it to be a little more clear. And I don't see any issue with that language. It doesn't affect the city, although they have, my understanding is the CCNRs are ready, and they're going to be sent to us shortly for the mayor and I to look them over. Then the last changes are clearing up the contact information on page 30, as well as the signature blocks. And so just so you're clear, the Meritage Companies is Jack's company, and the Mountain Vista Trails Company is Jack's wife's company. So there's not a third group. It's essentially the same group with under two LLCs, if that makes sense. And that was the changes that you saw. There were two questions there was a couple questions that the developer had. One was about hardboard. So essentially the siding in the townhome area. And there's a product out there called Smart Side. Go ahead, Craig. Yeah,
I brought a little sample.
Yeah. So essentially, if you remember, we were super focused on the quality of the materials, and so this is an example of the siding they've been putting on their units, and they want.
So our initial question is,
You got to paint it.
is when we're talking about.
It's a good product.
Well, I'll just kind of launch into this particular product. We actually prefer this product. It's sometimes there's some confusion because there's a cement product called Hardy Board that is cement, and this product is hard board. And so we just wanted to clarify with the city council: does the development agreement as currently written intend to exclude hardboard, which would be this product, without being too negative on cement board, because it certainly has its place. We prefer this product for a variety of reasons. Number one, it is waterproofed at the particle level, meaning that the little wood chips that you see in there, those are individually waterproofed. And then they glue everything together, and then they put a sealant over that. We have tested this product against cement board. We actually put one of these in a bucket of water for 90 days, and we compared it to cement board. This does not absorb moisture. Cement board often does absorb moisture. Our warranty issues with this product are much, much fewer. When it comes to durability and longevity, we prefer this product. And you can see from just looking at the texture of it, if I were to put this up against a cement board product and paint them both, you couldn't tell the difference. This product actually cost us more money to put up, but we prefer it just for the durability and longevity of it. So we would ask, if it wasn't already intended that we be allowed to use this type of hardboard product, that we be allowed to do so.
How often does that need to be painted?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not an expert on this, but what our building section has told me is that you don't need to repaint this nearly as often as cement board, and that paint doesn't chip nearly as bad on this product as it does cement board.
I would have guessed just the other way around.
I've installed this material and stuff. It's a good product. It's just you do have to paint it, but you do have to do it with cement board. So,
right,
I believe, John, our residential developments allows this material, doesn't it? Because I think the guy just down the street from me, that's what they used on their house.
We have it on ours.
And so I don't have a problem with that material. I did not realize it was more expensive.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm buying the cement board for the wrong guy then.
So, council, the whole reason we had identified this cementitious board was for the longevity. I don't have any reason to not fully believe that this stuff is quality, especially if Lyman and Cheryl have put it on their house.
So
I know Cheryl's particular, and I know Lyman's particular about what they use. So I think that helps.
So isn't there a parameters? Maybe it's not for this development that there's certain percent of brick stucco siding. Is there? I mean, like the CC&Rs for subdivisions will say you have to have 30% brick and so much stucco and so much siding. But would this fall under the siding part of that, or what?
So this would be considered the siding.
Yeah.
So instead of the cementitious siding, this product would be used.
So this is just going to take the place of that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And not take the place of any of the rock or anything
Correct.
like that. Okay.
Correct.
And then the other thing, and here again, I think this goes to the quality of the materials that I think that this particular group is talking about is their plan is to use natural stone, not a stone veneer, or a manufactured stone. And they wanted to make it clear, and so you can see I've added language in that if it's natural stone, they don't have to seal it because it isn't going to weather because it's a natural stone. So I think they're raising the bar a little bit on their project because of the concern they have for the quality of materials. And so if that's another request they'd make for a modification for the townhomes as well as the cottages. Correct, Craig?
Correct.
Yeah. So if any concerns with those two changes?
No.
Oh, and then the last thing, with this product, with this hardboard, they had just wondered about this. Essentially, this primed on all 6 sides is not required because it comes from the factory, essentially completely sealed and ready to go. Is that? I think this, or otherwise properly sealed, I think would cover that concern. If council's okay with that, this idea that this product will hold up because of the way it's manufactured and pre-sealed at the factory.
So my only Jim asked a question: how often do you have to paint it? You'll get varying degrees of responses. What the manufacturer will tell you, they'll probably tell you. Manufacturer will probably say 5 to 7 years or 7 to 10 years or something like that. You'll get some architects will say, oh, you got to do it every 2 or 3 years. Some maintenance people will say you got to do it every year. So you'll get a varying degree. But I'm not exactly sure what the manufacturer says of this particular stuff. But I would bet it's 7 to 10 years, depending on if it's getting hit by sprinklers all the time, or if it may even say it in there how often you have to do it. If it's up high and doesn't get much caustic type, less than that. Yeah, you probably you can go longer, so.
Well, one of the things I think we're concerned about is that this be a really nice looking place and you're going to have somebody manage it. And so we would hope that it won't go, if the paint looks crappy in 2 years, just because the manufacturer may say 7 years, you wait 7 years to pay that.
Certainly. And with respect to that, and I think you'll see in the CCNRs, the HOA will have the ability to, charge a monthly fee for upkeep items like that.
Thing that's nice about this material too is if it's damaged, it's much easier to repair than a cement board is. This is a much easier patch, and you can make it to where it doesn't look like a patch. Much easier than cement board.
To the specific question, what's your thoughts on sealed, primed on all 6 sides versus the way it comes from the factory?
The manufacturers.
That's sufficient in your mind?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Does this stuff overlap, or is it just meet
Just butt up
against like that?
I'm not a builder. I do the development. Carl,
Typically, when I've done this, it butts in and you trim it out. Is that what you did at your place? You put it together and then you have a trim piece that covered it.
Trim piece that covers the joint.
Is that kind of what?
On the sides, yeah.
Yeah.
Covers the side, yeah.
And that's how I've done it. They probably make one that's a
lap,
like a tongue and groove.
Yeah, like T111 siding type deal or something like that.
Like that stuff they're putting on the inside of houses now. What do they call that?
shiplap.
Shiplap. Yeah.
Yes. They probably make a product like that. They probably have 100 different styles of that material.
Okay.
And it's actually pretty good to work with. Pretty easy to work with.
Much easier to work with than cement board. Yeah.
I like it.
So council, I would the 6-sided priming. I would consider this or otherwise properly sealed. As if they're following the manufacturer's recommendations, then I would say that's properly sealed. Are you okay with leaving that?
Yep.
And are you okay, Craig, with that understanding from the council?
Yeah, we're fine with that.
Okay. The next section that they had a question about is streets. In particular, the area here. I wish I could use the pointer, but it doesn't show up on the screens. There's a question about they might want to fence this off as a gated community. Is that the concept?
We'd like the option if the feedback that we're getting from the market, from our 55 and over potential purchasers, is that they would prefer to have to limit access. We would like to have that option.
So the question is the council okay with that?
Would that just be the normal 6-foot fence at the highest it could be, John, or what?
So 6 foot is our standard height. The only time you go larger than 6 foot is when you're abutting commercial to residential. So it would be a 6-foot gate, although technically they could do a shorter gate if they wanted to.
Yeah.
It's more about restricting people going through than keeping people from climbing it.
So are you talking about a gate that has to be open, or are we talking about maybe an arm that somebody has a card, they swipe and that arm goes up, or what are we talking about?
Any or all of the above. Just some option that we'd like to keep open to restrict access.
Yeah, if you're
Whether that's
restricting cars, I think that arm thing would be
Right.
less obtrusive and would work. But if you're talking about keeping anybody from walking down around that sidewalk, then you're gonna have a gate.
Sure.
They have both at, there by the barn. They have the gate, and then on the side they have they have the arms that go up and down, and they have a gate that pedestrians can walk through.
Oh, okay. I'm okay with that.
So the roads are going to have
Yes.
gates. You can't
So John,
access the
I would
whole
say
area.
contingent upon fire marshal approval.
That's where I was going to say too.
Okay.
Just I'm okay with it as long as the fire marshal's okay with it. And they don't see any problem with fire access, emergency access.
The fireman would crash the gate doing 98. Said let them try.
You don't even have to do 98 in those big trucks.
Yeah, but then C.W. McCall wouldn't.
Well, then maybe let me modify what I just wrote. So
Typically, what we would do with the fire department, and we're fine with that caveat, by the way, is we would simply give them whatever punch codes or keys, whatever they need in order to get
I
through
just
there.
want them to sign
Sure,
off on
of
it. I
course.
don't want to say, go ahead and gate it.
Sure.
And the marshal comes in and says, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I don't want to go there.
That's a good call.
Is fire marshal 1L or 2?
Yeah.
Starts
I'm
with
not
a
sure.
F.
Someone said
I want to say 1.
Starts with a F.
Got two. Marshall always has two.
1L.
one.
LL would be a last name.
I think it's 1L.
Okay.
Right.
There you go.
So
But
I've
I
added
haven't
it.
been to law school, so, you know, spelling is.
Well, I had one, but I.
Probably Marcial, really, you know.
So the way it reads now is no private streets may be closed to access by the general public or fire emergency vehicles unless approved by the fire marshal in the cottage development area. And should I put and only in the cottage development area?
Yes.
Okay. And only
You're looking at
in the cottage development area.
Only
Does-
has one L.
spell check and fire marshal.
1N.
You right.
What do you think?
I would, yeah. See, this is what lawyers do for fun.
Right.
We critique one another's work. I might want something that says something to the effect of, no private streets may be closed to access by the general public or fire and emergency vehicles. Something maybe notwithstanding the foregoing, developer may restrict public access to the cottage development area subject to approval by the fire marshal.
South, it's fire marshal, so it's F-R-F-A-R.
FAR, that's right.
Yep.
That's why attorneys used to be paid by the word.
It's hard to type when you can't look up and see what you're typing.
You don't have that on your screen?
No.
In front of you? Oh.
It's,
No,
it's
I'm.
like floating.
I was reading earlier today about some lawyers that were kind of wicked and evil lawyers.
So, like that, notwithstanding the foregoing, developer may restrict access
so.
to the cottage development area as approved by the fire marshal.
Reading about the Ezra today.
Okay.
How many aunties of silver are you offering for that lot over there?
The next question that came up over the weekend, council, dealt with the dust barriers on the project development. Because the way it reads now, and I don't think this is the way we intended it to, the idea would be that they'd have to keep a dust barrier around the whole 34 acres the whole time. And what we want to do is essentially just say that they have to follow the SWIP plan that Justin will put on. So
Yeah, whatever the applicable SWIP plan is, we follow it.
Carl's nodding yes, and so that says yes
That's
to
what the law
me.
says.
okay. So I'll just put, let's see, during construction of the project, the developer will follow the
Approved.
approved SWIP plan.
Yeah.
SW.
APP.
No, SWPPP.
Oh,
Water Pollution Prevention Program.
is it just 2 Ps?
No, three, please.
3, yeah.
Okay. So
So now how do you spell marshal? Do you spell SWIP without an I in it?
it says during construction of the project, the developer will follow the approved SWIP plan. That work for you, Craig?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And then the last one. Now this is one, council, on section 26. I added this provision to try and because of how much we went through the language in the apartment area. I had added this kind of catch-all provision that says for any of these other development areas, the townhomes, the cottages, the independent living, anything that isn't covered under their specific development standards, they have to follow what the apartments were doing. And I had meant for that to mean to tie to, like we talked about, it's going to be stone and siding that's approved and landscaping. Craig and his group have had a concern, and so maybe Craig, you can explain to them exactly what.
Sure. We didn't read that narrow of a scope into that provision, and what we wanted to do was ensure that we don't have a default provision that doesn't make any sense, especially given that the apartments and the townhomes are somewhat dissimilar. If we're limiting this to exteriors, well, I guess what we would prefer to do is instead make sure that we're specific enough with our site plan approval and our building material, approved building materials, that we don't need to make reference to an apartment complex that really is different than what we're doing. So we would prefer to just eliminate any reference back to the apartments.
John, is there any section of the development that isn't covered under its own development agreement that this catch-all would serve to cover?
So, I would say that given the modification we just talked about related to the sure board, the hard board, I think that you could eliminate exterior building materials and just focus on landscaping, because I think you're spot on. That I think we're on that there's enough detail in the information now. We've had enough conversations about it that I think there's a meeting of the mind and we know what we're talking about. The reason I added in is I wasn't sure we got to that meeting of the mind, and so it was just kind of put in as a extra protection for the city. But if the developer's comfortable with what the exterior materials are going to be, not necessarily colors or things like that, but the type of materials, then we can back it out. I still like having something in there because we haven't ever gone over the ILF, the independent living facility, and I don't want someone to try and argue, well, they don't have to put up cementitious siding or this hardboard type product in stone, because I think you still want that. And is your group doing the independent living facility?
We're discussing that.
Okay.
We're discussing that. It is a distinct possibility, but we don't have anything nailed down. I guess, and I understand where you're coming from, John. My concern is, I hate introducing the potential for a misunderstanding of that provision when we could easily address the concern through the normal procedure, which is to have the mayor and the city manager approve our landscaping plan. Certainly they're going to take into account the landscaping plan for the other areas of the project, and my guess is that they would insist on some uniformity. I would let that be the standard rather than referring to an apartment area, and I'll be honest, I haven't seen a landscaping plan for the apartment area.
Right, there isn't a final plan for it. So, if you're okay with it, and I think this comes down to the judgment call of if you're comfortable with the quality of work that the developer's doing, we can back this out, because I think there is enough specificity on building materials, and then the landscaping plan is going to need to be approved by Rob and the mayor, and I know that neither of those folks are going to allow something that we don't want to be there. It's not just going to be grass. There's going to be plants and shrubs and other things that'll make it look good.
Yeah. So
if you're comfortable, we can just back out essentially this whole statement that I added. It's not something that I feel is vital now that we're further into the process with who we is basically under contract to do these townhomes.
Huh?
I'm good with that.
Well, I don't know. I've seen the landscaping of the mayor's and John's house. I'm not sure I want them approving landscaping anywhere.
My rose bushes are great.
I'll take the blame for that comment. My landscaping is a struggle. So.
Take it out.
Okay. And then that's the last.
John, did you do some changes on, it'd be page 20, section C, with including the clubhouse and pool? I have some stuff marked in red, crossed off in red. It says, although the proposal includes a clubhouse, a pool, and this is the part that says green space, these uses are accessory and only intended for residents of the complex unless otherwise designated.
So that provision was, I think I did mention it, but probably not thorough enough. That was piggybacked on the public access because there's going to be that north and south and east and west. But we wanted to make it clear that the developer and the owners can still limit access to the green space and anything that isn't that path. So they have the right to kick people off the property they don't want there. And that no one can look at the agreement and say, no, there's an easement for us to use this whole green space. We can come play football here if we want. And so that was the intent of that.
Football there, Jim.
So.
You could play there.
Yeah. Any other comments, council, on what we've talked about?
So, John, at the very first of this agreement, maybe you covered it. I swear when I was reading it earlier, it talked about parking. The number had changed or something like that, or there was red on it, or maybe I misread that. Maybe it wasn't parking. Maybe it was just the number of units. And
I think it was units.
It was. We have not. In fact, let me go to the parking area just so that.
It was kind of towards the first that I remember seeing
Yeah.
it, but maybe it wasn't the parking.
But there again, because I don't want the council to think that anything's changed that shouldn't have changed. Parking is its own section down here, section 16. So that it still has that language that says a parking spot's 9 feet by 19. And then it still identifies the 1,204 residential parking spaces and 148 commercial, which are the same numbers we had on the 10th.
It must have been the number of units or something. Because in my head it was the parking,
but no, and it's also really good to reemphasize it because that has been a major focus of this project since the very beginning. So if council, if you don't have any more questions and if you're comfortable, I think what we can do is, in reference to the townhome height, we'll just change the 39 feet on those units and attach that exhibit as Exhibit L to the 45 feet, not the 46, the 45, which is what we've now written into the agreement. So is there anything else I've missed, Craig?
No, I think we covered it. Let me just double check.
Our projectors on the fritz.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. I've had quite a nice time listening to you all on YouTube while I was driving down. Quite an entertaining bunch with on ties and everything, and all the other comments that were made. So
You're easily entertained.
good discussion. So, Council, where would you like to go from here?
Home.
Mayor, I'd move that we,
Put your mic a little bit closer to you.
I said home.
Mayor, I'd move that we approve the amendment to the Village at Prominence Point Development Agreement as discussed.
And it's Agreement A29 2017, so we're amending that.
Amending A29 2017 as discussed.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the Village of Prominence Point Development Agreement as discussed. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, I just, as we were having this discussion, and I don't think we wanted to put it in this agreement, but these type of developments are great, but they also have a potential to have a VRBOs and, vacation rental by owner type things that can happen in them. So I just think as a city, we need to look at some ordinance or something like that on those. Just because these developments, honestly, I've stayed in them. When we went down to St. George, I was in one. It was in a community like this. It was a twin home, and they had a pool, and it was awesome. But it does have the potential to do that, and so I just think we need to have something. But I don't think that needs to be in this agreement, but just something in the future.
That's a great point. John and I have discussed that a little bit, and there were some changes made in the legislative session, but that sounds like a good work session topic to bring and have a discussion with the whole council, because that is very likely to happen more. We do have a couple already in the city, and we've got some complaints from some neighbors on them, so it'd be a good work session topic. We'll make sure to bring that one back soon. Anything else? Okay, we'll start the voting with Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
Councilman Uri,
Yes.
Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that motion passes on a 5-0 vote. And we'll go on to item 6, which is related to annexation of this property as well. So we need to hold a public hearing. First, why don't, John, you just give us a little synopsis of what's the status of this annexation, then we'll hold a public hearing and then bring it back to council for discussion.
So, as you all know, in the annexation process, there are certain deadlines that take about 90 days from start to finish at the minimum. This is the end of that 90 days, in that there's been a 45-day protest period and then a 45-day response period. If there were any protests filed, there weren't any as far as bringing it into the city. And so now's the time to approve the annexation. This will finalize it and assign the zone, right?
Because we're doing ordinance.
Right, and so this would approve the annexation, and then you would assign the MPC-BPP zone, which has the development agreement you've just approved as a fundamental component of that zoning designation.
Well, for those here and those on YouTube, maybe point out on that development right there where it's at.
Oh, yeah. So the area we're actually talking about is this area here is being annexed, as well as a little box right here that was just south of where the Country Boy Dairy parking lot is. So it's kind of everything behind Country Boy Dairy building and a little box right here where there's a development sign right there right now for Ward Farms, if you know where that is. So the staff recommends that we go ahead and bring the property into the city, and then the council approve a zone that they believe is appropriate for it.
Any questions on this before the public hearing? Okay, then the public hearing is now open. If anyone would like to make any comments on this proposed annexation, we invite forward at this time.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you. Seeing none.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Then the public hearing is closed, and we do a public hearing at every annexation so that the neighbors and others can comment if they so desire. So with that then, John, is there anything else you'd like to say on this before council's discussion?
Nope, I don't have anything else other than this is kind of the last piece in the puzzle, and I think it'll be fun to see the dirt starting to turn down there.
Do we have an ordinance number?
2017-23.
21?
23.
23.
Councilman Uri?
I just had a question come to my mind. You know, we have collected fees have we collected them on this portion that we haven't annexed in yet, or are we going to be collecting some more impact fees off of that portion now?
As the development unfolds?
Well, we've already collected some impact fees on that piece that's...
Oh, for the assisted care?
Is that the only part that we've...
That's the only piece we've collected impact fees for so far. As any of the other pieces come in for their building permit, we'll collect the fees at that time.
So we haven't collected any kind of fees off that other piece of property?
Not for any of the townhomes, apartments, or commercial buildings, just the assisted living center so far.
I understood that we'd collected some of those fees, and that's what helped pay for some of the road down there.
We made an agreement with the CDA to pay part of that road through paying some of the impact fees. But none of that has happened yet because they haven't taken out impact fees for any of the housing. So there's a plan in place that the CDA will pay a portion of the impact fees as a contribution towards the road, but we didn't pay any actual cash. It will come in the form of a partial payment of the impact fees as they are issued, as those impact fees are paid.
So we're paying back the CDA, is that what you're saying? The money that we don't already have in the CDA?
Basically, the contribution that the CDA is making will be paid back to the developer. He paid for all of the road, even though the city committed to pay a portion of it, but not as cash, as a partial impact fee payment by the CDA. So the CDA will be then owing the impact fee funds for the amount that was essentially waived is not the right word, but was not paid by the developer.
So the CDA fund, which we don't have any money in,
Now it's going to have less.
now is going to have even less money in.
It will have some credits that it owes to sewer, to stormwater, to road impact fees. So no actual money will come out of the CDA. There'll be an accounting mechanism to ensure that, the CDA owes, for every permit, the CDA owes, $200 to water, $100 to sewer.
Yeah, I'd like to see a schedule of how much the CDA actually owes to impact fees and other things.
Sure, we can get that for you. Absolutely.
We don't have any money right now in the CDA, so I'd hate to give it all away before we try to pay it back.
The good news is, Councilman, next January 1st, our CDA is getting triggered because we had 3 years, if you remember. We could trigger 16, 17, or 18. This is our last year, so it's going to get triggered, and the CDA will start collecting money next year.
Well, I'd like to see, if we could have Evan put together a report of how much we're actually in the hole in the CDA right now, and how much it owes to each fund.
Absolutely, we can get that for you. Okay, any other discussion, or is anyone ready to make a motion on the acceptance of this property for annexation and the assignment of the master plan community zone?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve ordinance 2017-23, the annexation of the property located at 1851 North Washington Boulevard, and designate the property as a zone MPC-VPP.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to accept the property at 1851 North Washington Boulevard and assign the master plan community zone village at Prominence Point designation. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Satterthwaite.
And a yes.
Councilman Uri.
Yes.
Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then that annexation is approved on a 5-0 vote as well. And we'll move on now to our moderate income housing report. It's been an odd coincidence of timing, but the state has sent us a reminder that we are due to submit our biannual moderate income housing report. By state law, every city has to submit a moderate income housing report every 2 years to the state that shows how the city, what specific steps the city is taking to meet the demand for moderate income housing in the city, and to ensure that there is a variety of housing in the city. So John has prepared with some assistance a proposed moderate income housing report. That was part of your packet. We'll go over some of those highlights and then ask council for your approval on this moderate income housing report that we will then submit to the state.
So I'm going to sneak down here where it's a little easier for me to see what's going on. So council Although maybe the mouse doesn't want to work this far away from.
You want me to, I can help.
Yeah, if you could run it. Thank you. So the whole purpose of the moderate income housing report is to look at what's called the average mean income for the Weber County area. So the nice thing is, or I hate to say nice thing, but what they do is they look on it as at a regional level as opposed to honing it down to the city, because our AMI would be much higher than Ogden's or maybe Roy's or some of the other communities. So they look on it on a county level. It's a number established by the a division of the census, so the federal census folks do the work. Right now, the 100% AMI, which is kind of the average mean income, is about $81,000, and then everything that's based for moderate income housing is based on 80% of that number. And so what it says is, you look at the 80%, 80th percentile, which in our case is $61,300, and you look at what those people can afford for housing, and the way that they typically look at it is it's 30% of their gross income available per month. And then they calculate out and say, this is how much of a house they could afford if they're going to buy, and this is the amount of rent they can afford. And so what that essentially, well, you have a question.
Is the AMI, is that per household? Or is that it's per household? So
per household.
Okay.
So a 2-income family
that
has $80,000 is they're not considered a moderate income family. Yeah. And so essentially the way it shakes out is, to be a moderate income home for purchase, it's about $200,000 or less home for sale, which according to the most recent data that the census had available, or the ACS system is what it's called, they're about 46 to 47% of the units in the city qualified because their value was less than $200,000. Now, with the most recent trends we've been seeing in home values, when we redo this number and they bring out the new information, most likely that number will drop significantly, because there's a number of units in the city that are increasing to where they're going to be over that 200,000. But at the same time, the AMI number goes up because salaries increase as inflation goes up. And so they kind of work together. And so what you might see is in the coming years, it won't be $200,000. It might be a $210,000 home. But then for rent homes, it's actually a little easier because rental units require less money in the total grand scheme of things. For example, the $200,000 home is not just the home payment. It includes taxes, insurance, utilities, all of that stuff combined together. And so rents, you can actually afford a little bit more per month because you're not paying the taxes and you're not paying the insurance and you're not. So there's things that aren't getting folded into that cost. So technically $1,500 is the range for a moderately priced rental unit, which seems quite high, but that's the numbers the ACS gives us. And so there again, to break it down, what they're saying is, if I make, for ease of numbers, $6,000 a month, or $5,000 a month, which is close to $61,000 a year, then that means I can take 30% of that money, or $1,500, and that I can apply towards housing each month. Or if that puts me at the moderate income housing level. There's two other levels. One is the low income and then the very low income. And currently in our city, we have no housing stock that really qualifies for that. I mean, I think the report says that we've got in the 3% range that's the very low, and then about 10% that's low. But that also, those areas will almost be eliminated with the coming numbers that'll come in 2 years, because there just isn't a house worth less than $100,000 in North Ogden in 2 years with the way the market's been. Same thing happens for our rent. We have very few units that are in the sub $500 range, which is what most people can afford in the very low income. And how that kind of relates, the way I like to think of it is, if you look at what our employees are making, what this moderate income housing is trying to do is make sure that people can live and work in the same community. So if we have a public works employee who's making $17 an hour, what can they afford? Can they afford to live in the city limits? And so that's kind of what this is all geared towards, and that's the reason why it's important. Adding rental units makes housing availability go up. Even if the project we've just approved, even if those rents eventually someday do go over the $1,500 a month, right now the projections aren't that they will, but if they ever do, then what that actually does is, because those are the brand new fancy units, the other units in the city maintain the lower rental rate, and so those units are actually somewhat protected. But right now our numbers are showing that even the apartments and stuff that are coming in brand new are still going to be affordable or moderate income housing for folks, even though they're not rent controlled, federally subsidized, or anything like that. Right now, our general plan that we adopted 2 years ago said that we should be adding 100 new moderate income housing units per year. In the past 2 years, we've only added 75, and those have all been single-family home permits where the value came in less than $200,000. But in the past several months, we've had one of 20 or 30 single-family homes that would qualify. And so that because there again, people are now starting to tip over that $200,000 mark, and there's just not as many new stock being built that'll satisfy the moderate income housing requirement. So moving forward, the city's going to have to look at strategies to encourage cheaper starter homes, for lack of a better word, or more rental units. And I know rental units aren't what people typically want to see, but you can get a better quality unit for rent, or a townhome unit that qualifies for moderate income housing, than you can a single family unit, because there's not the acreage and a lot of the infrastructure costs that have to go into the single family units that drive the price up. Does that make sense? And so this report just goes through the statutory outline. Here's the question, which is in bold. So it'll say the section, it'll give the question, and then it'll give the answer. And what I kind of walk through is a smattering of everything in all these sections. And so let's just go through the questions, and we don't necessarily need to read all the information unless the council would like to understand the better details. So the question in section 1 is, in this section below, or on a separate sheet, which is what we've done, estimate the need for moderate income housing in your city or county for the next 5 years. And we've just maintained the 100 unit count that we had in the general plan, because there's nothing that's indicated that number should change, but it might go up in the future. The trouble we have is we only do about 100 to 140 building permits a year for single family homes, and so it's hard to make all of them moderate income housing. So by adding the apartments, it satisfies, or it helps us meet that goal. Will you go to the next page, Susan? So section 2 question is, it says, please prepare a report of the findings of the biannual review of moderate income housing of your city or county's comprehensive plan. Please also describe the method in your assessment. Most of the information I used was found online, either on the census or some real estate websites. There's a lot of good real estate websites out there that actually provide you historic sales, costs, average rent even. And so I've used those sites to kind of pick to confirm the data that the ACS or the census folks were giving us. Section 3, it says, please describe the efforts made by your city or county to reduce, mitigate, eliminate local regulatory barriers to moderate income housing. In this section, I focused on the MPC zone that we passed a couple years ago, as well as the accessory dwelling units in the RCC zone, which is designed to allow for people to share a single family home, not change the character, but reduce the cost to the people living there. And the city doesn't currently have anything in our books that I think discourages moderate income housing, but there are cities that have citywide ordinances that says 3 sides of your home need to be brick, or you must have a 2-car garage, or you must do this. We don't have any of those standards in our city, and those would be seen as things that discourage moderate income housing because they drive the cost of homes. Section 4, it says, describe the actions taken by your city to encourage preservation of existing moderate income housing and development of new moderate income housing. This kind of piggybacks on the previous section, and I have focused this essentially on the idea that we are trying to encourage rental units, high quality, even though we can't force people to build moderate income housing. The only thing we can do is give them a carrot as opposed to a stick, and I think like the MPC zone, we've done that. But at some point, we might be in a situation. A great example is Summit County. I mean, the average home price in Summit County is $1.8 million. The only way they can get any moderate income housing is to force people who are doing multifamily projects to use some subsidized housing. And some of those places have to do that. And they do it because they need the workers. The workers need to live close enough to the stores that are serving the out-of-towners that they can afford to get there, drive in. In fact, there was a town I lived in Michigan for a little while that they couldn't get people. They were paying people at McDonald's $15 an hour 20 years ago to work because they couldn't find workers because the people couldn't afford to live close enough to their work. So they had to pay them more to drive in from 30, 40 miles away.
I have a friend that owns the McDonald's at Kimball Junction, and he actually, his employees, he brings in by van from Evanston to work there.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. He has a guy that's hired as a van driver, picks them up, brings them over to work the shifts, and because he can't get employees out of Summit County there to work at that McDonald's.
And there's a good chance he probably pays them during their travel time to get there as well. So luckily we're not in that situation yet, and it might be a ways off. But this is the whole reason for moderate income housing plans, and the reason it's important. Even though sometimes we think, why is the state trying to micromanage it? So it's because they're taking kind of that global view.
John?
Yeah.
What would happen if we didn't turn this into the state?
They
could do slap our hand.
They would get mad, and they would. The end result is they might not. There's probably nothing legally or dramatically they can do related specifically to the moderate income housing plan, but they do have other things, other carrots they take away, or they might have some sticks, like they might start talking to the state auditor and say, oh, we really should look at North Ogden because they're not filling their annual reports out.
And the biggest threat is not just to us, but that the legislature will put something in statute to take this out of the hands of cities. And it is being very actively discussed at the legislature because there's a lot of cities, or I don't know if I want to say a lot, some cities that haven't taken this seriously, don't file the reports, are not taking any actions. They send a report in that basically says we're not doing anything, or that kind of a thing. So it's one of those that right now the legislature has not put a penalty, but the message is coming clear from the legislature that cities need to take this seriously, or they're going to, make some additional modifications.
Well, is the federal legislator driving this to the state legislature, or the state the driving force behind it?
The state has had this requirement for a number of years, since the early 2000s. I don't know for sure. They last modified it in 2012, and the discussion then was to actually require some specific things. But the negotiation between ULCT and the state legislature was, if cities, make a good faith effort and there's this reporting requirement, then penalties were left out of it in that 2012 change.
Do they have to file a report? The state have to file a report with the federal government, or is this just
I don't know on that,
thing?
John. Do you know if there's there may be? I don't know on that.
If this is a state-driven thing, it sounds kind of like the state legislature are hypocrites because they don't want the federal government telling them how to run the state, but yet they tell us how to run the cities.
No, but we're entities of the state.
Yes, that's their
what they'll tell you.
response. States are sovereign, cities are entities, creatures of the state, is the famous
Creations of the
Supreme
state,
Court's
that's right.
ruling. Cities are creatures of the state.
So they can do what they don't like having done. We digress.
Yes.
As I joke with our planner Brandon quite often, it's the only form of government we don't want is the one right above us. I mean, it's essentially the state doesn't want the feds meddling in what the state's doing, but what we're doing is within their scope, their purview, just like the feds think what the state's doing is in their purview. So it's just everyone wants to be the top tier, if that makes sense, which is that's the way our country was kind of founded. And so that's the way we function. The Section 5 focuses on the number of permits. So over the past 5 years, we've issued 214 homes that would qualify as moderate income housing. There again, all of those are single family units. Because I did not include the townhomes that were just approved at the ranches, that they came in July. I ended it in the previous year because that's the information they're asking for, is the previous fiscal years. And then Section 6 is talk about the efforts that your city to coordinate moderate income housing plans and actions with neighboring local governments. We don't coordinate our moderate income housing plans, but we have tried to do some coordination on projects. Right now, we are working with Harrisville to allow some stormwater to leave a Harrisville moderate income housing complex and then go to our Mud Creek Basin, which then immediately drains back into Harrisville. We tried to do some things with Pleasant View over on Pleasant View Drive. We talked about it, but those projects didn't get off the ground. If you remember, it wasn't rezoned for those units that had been requested, but we had tried to talk with Pleasant View about those projects as well. So we don't do a lot, in particular because our two neighbors, even though they are fairly suburban, oftentimes we focus on the idea that we're quite rural, and so there's not a lot of projects going into those areas that need to be coordinated with us because we're all kind of in the same situation. But you will remember that Harrisville and Pleasant View both have some large townhome projects and apartment units that have gone in the past 10 years. Pleasant View out on 89, just west of the Pepsi plant, and Harrisville just west of Majestic. In fact, I think they're finishing their last apartment building there these coming months. So,
John, just a question I just happened to think of. Are these values, saying that this is moderate income housing, are these values based on the value of the home, the building permit taken out for the home, or the value that the home sells for?
So we've based it on the value that the permit, that essentially it's the value that's on the tax records, because my understanding is that's the value that the ACS is using, or the census folks. They're using the data that the data.
If we say when we've had homes that are built under $200,000, that's not what they're selling for. Some of those are very well selling for more than $200,000.
I think typically,
which to me makes that not moderate income housing if you're based on that.
And over time, these numbers will change as home values go up. Because it is based on the current home value as assessed by the county.
I think the most recent permit that was pulled that was under $200,000 was at $198,000. So they are, they're pushing. They're just right there on the cusp.
But it's interesting to me that we can say that's moderate income housing based on the dollar amount for a permit, not on how much that house is going to sell for. Because is that really moderate income housing if that house that had a permit for $198,000 sold for $270,000?
Right.
I don't think it is.
Right, and so with that in mind, you can see why there's a need for the city to do something, and I'm not saying I'm an advocate of rental units or I'm an advocate of tiny homes, but you can see that in our area, the market is pricing us out of it unless the city does something, and if we can only do what we can do, in the sense that we can approve apartments. Make sure that they're quality apartments. They're not going to be unsafe for people. The only way for single-family units to get any cheaper is to reduce lot sizes. But even at a certain point, that only goes so far. There again, reaching back to Summit County, I know someone who owns a lot that you can't even build a 1,800 square foot home on, so 0 lot line setback, front setback of 20 feet. And you can't put 1,800 square feet on 3 levels, and the lot is worth $300,000 or $400,000. So it's just at a certain point the market will price us out, which is why people get trucked in from Evanston, or why there has to be subsidized housing. And I'm not saying that's what the city's goal is. In fact, our goal would be to not have subsidized housing, but have some way to keep the rent down so that people can live in our community.
See, there's another thing that's coming to me now. We're saying that 30% of somebody's income could qualify for a house payment. And so that's what the moderate, now 30% of their income could qualify for a house based on a $198,000 building permit or a $250,000 sales price.
So
there's a flaw there somewhere.
I think you're right. I think there is a flaw there, but in the data they don't parse it out. I think the intent of the people who write it is to focus on the sell price. I think that's the real intent, and what we've done based on the information we have is focused on the value for the new units. The only thing that is encouraging is, as we rely on the apartments and the rental units coming in, we're confident that the rentals of most of the units that are coming in the city won't exceed $1,500, because that's our market just isn't supporting that kind of rate for 1 and 2 and 3 bedroom apartments.
So in my mind, if this legislature were to make a change in that and say, hey, you've got to figure it on the sales price instead of the building permit price, then we're way out of whack, a lot further than we think we are.
Well, and there's an update mechanism. About every 5 years, we'll actually have to do a more detailed review to determine the need based on, and that actually uses values, more current data than this report we're doing right now.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do that. We hired Zions Bank Public Finance to do that analysis, and that'll kind of bring those values more to current, because you're exactly right. Otherwise, if we just base it on this, the building permit price, even from years ago, then the data gets stale pretty quickly as home values rise. So in 2 or 3 more years, we're going to need to do a more detailed version of an analysis of what the need is. Also, I just wanted to read to your question earlier, Councilman Uri, so you can know at least the legislature's intent here. The law, and I'll send you all the link, but this is from section or code 10-9A401. The legislature has made a determination. Excuse me here, get to the right page. The legislature has made a determination that cities shall facilitate a reasonable opportunity for a variety of housing, including moderate income housing, to meet the needs of the people desiring to live there and to allow persons with moderate income to benefit and fully participate in all aspects of neighborhood and community life. So that's kind of the intent statement from the legislature.
Yeah. And there again, I like to bring it back home. If you look at the number of employees that are living in that work for the city, and you look at what they're making an hour, the majority of our employees, if they were the only income in the house, can't afford to live in our city.
That's right.
And and in particular, where that might strike home the most sometimes is police officers, the community they work in, they can't afford to live in. And that's not the case for all of them. But if they were just relying on their salary, they can't afford to buy a home in North Ogden anymore. So it's just the reality, and that's why they look on a county-wide as far as what the income should be for the county and the housing needs. What's currently happening now is Ogden City is making up for all the moderate income housing in the county. Every city except for them is deficient in the number of units according to the county's moderate income housing plan. So we're all short except for Ogden, which has an excess of units of moderate income housing units. But even a lot of those units are getting priced out. The ones just east of the DDO or the BDO that a couple years ago a brand new home was selling for 140, they're not selling for that anymore because people, it's a small place, but they're nice homes and it's safe and people want to live there, so the prices are going up. So anyways, if any other questions I can answer? Yeah.
So we're asking for action to consider this report. Is this the actual report you're going to send to the state, or is there something else you're sending? Or?
So pull up the PDF that says it has the same title there, Susan. So what? Oh, sorry, it's a different one. Yeah, it's
You have two of them. Do you know which one it is? You have two more.
This is a flawed report. I don't know why we're doing this report when it's so flawed like this.
I don't know which one it is.
What moderate income housing is.
It'll be the next. It'll be the.
Is available.
Next.
Yeah.
Questions?
So there's an official report format. It's this one, and that's where it says. So we'll send this in kind of as a cover sheet with the documents attached, and this is also. It says you can fill it in on this report. That's what I've used as my guide for how much information to provide. Because if they asked for this much, that's how much I gave them. I didn't do 5 pages in a section that they only provided enough space to do 300 or 400 words. So it's not designed.
Is this what we're going to approve?
So you're approving the document that we just went through with the Word document, and this is the cover page for that Word document. So what the way this says is attach a separate sheet of paper if you want. You don't have to type it into this. You can just attach a separate sheet, and that's what we've done because the formatting just looks a little better.
Could you take 45 minutes to explain this form to me, please? I'm joking, Cheryl.
Let me get out of the way of that look.
Well, and also on top of this, because of the efforts that we've made with the Village at Prominence Point, we're not having to do some of the extra steps that would have been required had we not been close to meeting the goal that we set 2 years ago. So it helps that project's come through, because otherwise I think there'd be some more steps we'd have to do as far as getting a formal update of our moderate income housing plan. So
did I hear right? This report happens every 2 years?
This happens every 2 years, and then about every 5 years, we need to do the report to determine the need for moderate income housing. That is the more detailed statistical analysis. It was done in 2015 as part of our general plan. So by about 2020, we'll need to do that again, but still, this happens every 2 years regardless.
So a Village of Prominent Point is all built out in 2 years. We'd fulfilled this, but if it isn't, are we in trouble?
Our 2015 statistical analysis showed, as John said, the need for 100 additional housing units for each of the next 5 years, because it has, again, a 5-year horizon. So if Village at Prominence Point and maybe the other project, the townhome project by Maria Montessori, is both reasonably going, then we've probably met that. Now, again, it's not such that if we come to 450 units, that the state is going to suddenly come and say, hey, you're 50 short of what the numbers showed. We're making a reasonable effort to meet it, and we should be fine. But, if we were doing nothing, maybe we would have some more requirements from the state or more impetus for the state to start adding more details into the requirements. So I think the report John has put together shows we're making a good faith effort to meet the legislature's intent to have a mix of housing. We've identified areas for it. We've made a bunch of progress in our zoning. We didn't have master plan community zone just a couple years ago. You know, we've created some pockets along our state highways for some high quality but higher density projects. So I think we're meeting the legislature's intent. If we don't get the exact number, it won't, I don't think that will be any problem at all. It's a goal, and the legislature wants us to report the substantive steps we're taking to meet it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
So is the next step that the city buys property and the city builds buildings and then the city rents them out?
Yes, Bernie, I think that'd be what it'd be.
Well, so the most extreme example available is New York City, where they have absolute rent controlled, and people literally wait for people to pass away so they can take over the apartment. Like rental apartments go from father to son or grandmother to granddaughter because family, it's too hard to find a place to live in New York City that is affordable. So, and some cities have done that. I don't know that our city will have to, but
yeah, the plans we're putting in place, I think we're going to meet the legislature's intent. We're not going to be a city that stands out at all. We're making a reasonable effort to have a variety of housing, and it's still going to be nice. It doesn't, to be clear, moderate income doesn't mean low income or subsidized. There's no requirement to have any areas in a city for that. So the projects we're contemplating on Washington Boulevard and 2700 North should meet the city's expectations under state law for years and years into the foreseeable future, if not until build out.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, John.
So, council, is there any further discussion on this, or we just ask you to basically approve the plan we're submitting on behalf of the city?
So I make a motion to approve the plan that our attorney has put together, the moderate income housing report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the city's moderate income housing report. Is there any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Uri.
I think it's such a flawed report. I have a hard time voting yes on it. I'm not that you're flawed in it, but that the state guidelines are flawed in this thing. That I don't think I'll vote yes because you followed the state guidelines, but it's flawed.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker.
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite.
Yes.
Okay, that passes 5-0, and Councilman Uri, your sentiments are shared by many of us as well, and I fear this will be an area that is going to be revisited in the next few years to the legislature, by the legislature, because there's cities that are not making any good faith efforts to meet the legislative intent. The idea was that the legislature was going to give cities the discretion to meet the general goals of the legislature somehow, somewhere in their city, according to their general plans, and without the heavy hand of, a punishment, an exact percentage, and all that kind of stuff. But, there's a lot of demand for moderate income housing for young people, even, older people who don't have kids. There's all kind of people who might be in that category, and there's a lot of demand for it in a lot of places and not much supply. And the finger is getting pointed towards regulations by cities to keep that kind of housing out of their city. So it's likely it's probably going to be revisited again. I don't know this session, but maybe soon, or it could be this session as well. So we'll keep you posted if anything's coming up to tinker with this part of the Utah Code further. Okay, our last item number 9, is discussion and/or action to consider canceling our city council meeting. We have a meeting scheduled on November 7th of course, that's the night of the election as well. So we'd like to encourage people to vote. And
Move that we cancel the meeting.
Second.
okay, we have a motion and a second to cancel November 7th meeting. Is there
For sure.
any further discussion? We'll start the voting with Councilman Swanson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite,
Yes.
and Councilman Uri.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That is closed. And lastly, Council, I'd like to ask you for a closed session to discuss purchase or sale of real estate of something that has come up today, and I think is important for you to be updated on. We do have a possible closed meeting always listed on our agenda, so I'll come back to that in a minute. But first, let's do our comment period. So, is there anything you'd like to share with council? We invite you forward at this time. Okay, we'll do our staff comments. Susan, anything? John?
Nope.
Okay. Councilwoman Stoker, let's start with you tonight. Councilman Satterthwaite. Oh,
Thank you.
Councilman Uri.
Nope.
Councilman Swanson.
No.
Councilman Turner.
Just one question, I haven't found out if they, if I understand, Greg Thorpe came and met with Evan, and has everything got done with the Chalk Festival, and then everything went well there, and
I thought all the accounting had been done, was what I had heard, John.
I just hadn't heard a final
Okay.
report on it. So I just-
I'm pretty sure I remember signing a check for it, so.
Okay, all right, great. I haven't heard, and I don't know if Cheryl's heard
I haven't.
how much they did or how well they did or anything, but just curious.
I
I'll
think-
find out from
I
Greg.
think we ought to have a report on that, so it's public information.
I do too.
Okay, we'll get one together. That's a great idea. Okay,
That's it. Thank you.
thank you. I have nothing, so
Move that we adjourn the public meeting and can reconvene in a closed meeting
Second.
and for the discussion
for
of
the discussion.
purchase or sale of real
Purchase or
estate.
sale of real estate, yes.
Do you concur with that?
Second,
Second?
yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second to have a closed session to discuss the purchase or sale of real estate. John?
The only item.
Oh, actually, we probably should have threatened or pending litigation.
Amend my motion then to include threatened or pending litigation.
Concur.
Second concurs. Okay, so we have an amended motion to go into a closed session to discuss the purchase or sale of real property and threatened or pending litigation. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Start the vote with Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilwoman Stoker,
Yes.
Councilman Satterthwaite, Councilman Uri,
Yes.
and Councilman Swanson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll take just a brief recess and then reconvene in the closed meeting.